After the Fire-Water split, Coils of the Snake saw two types of competitive players going into its third set. Fire players were taking advantage of the fact that for whatever reason, Bandai was continuing to release broken fire cards and make fire the best element to play. Mental players are enjoying a brand new way to play the game and exploiting the crap out of a new mechanic that the other elements just were not ready for. But what happened to poor old water? While not as popular and definitely not as powerful, water did find a strange way to survive in the metagame. With all these new toys that let water discard their own ninjas to blow up cards on their opponent's side of the field, water had an unrivaled amount of target removal. The gameplay would go like this. Meta players would build these big, beefy teams of the most powerful, most expensive cards in the metagame, and they would send them to attack. You'd block with friggin' Anko or something, I don't know. Now the opponent's team is successfully blocked, they will not get any battle rewards. You hero yourself with Twin Snake Sacrifice, taking their most powerful card. Now your opponent gets no battle rewards, ends their strongest ninja is dead. On your next turn, you throw Irika up on the altar. Bam! End of the demon. Dead Irika, dead Third Hokage. Once your opponent's field is clear of threats, you drop a game-winning card like Zabuza Momochi, and when you declare an attack, your opponent has one of two options. Either they let you take this chance to get yourself ahead and put you in a game-winning position, or they decide to block with what little ninjas they have left on the field. You declare an attack, you wait for an answer, and if you don't get the answer you want, Striking Shadow Snake! Get over here! This was not a very reliable strategy, but it was so funny. So Curse of the Sand. This is a very overlooked set by the Naruto community, for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the set did pretty much nothing to further the metagame. Fire and mental decks almost didn't change at all. Secondly, it's in the awkward spot of being massively overshadowed by its soon-to-be younger brother, Revenge and Rebirth. But honestly, I don't think Curse of the Sand quite gets the recognition it deserves. You'll notice that so far I've been calling decks fire decks, water decks, lightning decks, mental decks, but in Curse of Sand they finally started bringing in the idea of archetypes, something that made the casual scene blossom into something very fun and unique. Soon people were showing up with Byakugan decks, Toad decks, it was really crazy. I don't want to get into the habit of talking about non-competitive archetypes because if I did, we could be here forever on some sets. But seeing as how this is the set that brought us archetypes, and there's also not much going on in the metagame, we might as well take a look at what they came up with. By the way, some of you are probably getting pretty heavy Yu-Gi-Oh vibes right now. Trust me, this is nothing. Wait until we get to the extra deck with, coincidentally, purple cards that you play by fusing two or more characters on the field. It's time to copyright infringe. Since this set is Curse of Sand, I suppose we should look at Gaara and the wind element first. An exclusive Gaara was released into starter decks, and while it is marginally better than the other Gaara we had, unfortunately it's still not very good. Awkward, considering this was supposed to be a set about Gaara and the Sand Village. Gaara is a turn 2 4-0, and when you get a victory or an outstanding victory, you can give 1 damage to one of your ninjas to win a battle reward. This would be a very novel effect if Kakashi didn't already exist and wipe the floor with him. You could cheese it up a bit by throwing him into a fire deck with Kakashi so you win 2 battle rewards every time you get a victory, but then you have to find a way to heal your ninjas every turn and it can get kinda messy. Sand Burial was the follow-up to Sand Coffin, and it sort of finishes the line because Sand Burial allows you to injure a ninja or turn a ninja into a 0/0, and Sand Burial just straight up ices a ninja who's already injured. Sand Coffin, Injure, Sand Burial, deleted. This, unfortunately, wasn't really that good either, because you were essentially paying 3 chakra to ice 1 ninja, and that's just not very cost effective. On the other hand, though, the Sand Village did produce one very good card in the form of Baki. On the turn that Baki attacks, as long as he is still in your village at the end of the turn, your opponent has to select one of their ninjas and discard it. This card is nightmare fuel because one ninja represents one of your turns. You get one ninja play per turn. If your opponent discards one of their ninjas, even if it's a very weak ninja, that's essentially like losing an entire turn's worth of progress. And every ninja has some kind of value. That ninja that they're discarding was supposed to be a meat puppet, or it was supposed to be used in some kind of combo. So them having to get rid of it is very, very tough. And unfortunately, it is wind, so of course fire wind mental decks took advantage of it. Tamari's the only other kind of relevant character that came out of the Sand Village. Your opponent has to pay one extra chakra to target a ninja in Tamari's team, which is it's okay, but it's not really that busted. It makes the cost of cards like Trigram go up to 3, and then of course Water Vortex is going to go up to 4, and it's useful, but it's not going to win you the game. It's just going to slow your opponent down long enough for you to think. When you send Iyashi out to attack, you could heal a ninja at the end of the turn. Kind of an awkward card to play around, but if you were playing a mental power deck, it was surprisingly easy to proc. Ebisu let you draw a card when it was put in play, and a 4-2 really wasn't that bad on turn 3. Most decks were playing 1 to 2 copies of this card for the card draw, and then of course you just sacked it off because you couldn't win any battle rewards with it and it was useless. Suzume was released as a blocking version of Ibiki, which was pretty cool. The idea is you could put these two into a team with a high mental power ninja, and then whether this team attacks or blocks, it's always going to cause a mental power battle. One of the main flaws of mental power decks is it's hard to consistently get mental power battles unless you're giving up a lot of cards, like you're playing a lot of mission cards instead of regular mission cards, or you're playing jutsus, or you're doing stuff to keep the mental power battles up. But these are no-cost mental power battles, and you could do it on attack or on block, which made it great. Carrier Kite lets you nope a ninja out of existence if it was being targeted by a jutsu. Your opponent can't 8 trigrams if you don't exist. Electro Board was part of a pretty interesting strategy if you were playing a mental power deck. The way it worked was you played a card like Ibiki, and you declared Ibiki, and then you declared a card on your opponent's strongest team that doesn't have mental power. Then when Ibiki attacks, he ends up beating that ninja's team because it's a mental power battle. You could also be pretty cheesy and declare one of your ninjas and one of your opponent's chump blockers, and then when you attack with that ninja, they have to block with their meat puppet, so your regular attack can go through, or they have to block with their strongest team. Probably the most hyped thing we got out of Curse of Sand was the Hyuga clan archetype. I mean, it wasn't any good, but it was a fun thing to play around with. Hiyashi Hyuga was the first Hyuga boss monster, and he's really, really bad. Every turn you could pay one chakra to shut down your opponents. Neji. Oh no, not Neji. How am I supposed to win? Hanabi was pretty good actually. She got all of your Byakugan ninjas out one turn earlier. That way you could shut down your opponent's dreaded Neji on turn 4. And of course we got new versions of Hinata and Neji. The new Hinata had a gimmick, where if she was already injured and she received any damage, you could flip a coin, and if it were heads, you could negate the damage and she doesn't die. Not something you rely on, obviously, but you'd be surprised at how effective she was at being a chump blocker. Neji, on the other hand, made it so your opponent's head ninja couldn't use jutsu, which, oddly enough, wasn't that relevant here at this point in the game, but could be a bit relevant for something coming up. So keep an eye on him. We also got some Bakugan Jutsu cards in the form of Gentle Fist and, well, Byakugan. These are where the gimmick of the archetypes start to shine a little bit. They both discard random cards from your opponent's hand. Gentle Fist allowed you to pay 2 to get a 2/2 bonus to one of your Byakugan users and discard one card from your opponent's hand, while the actual Byakugan card lets you pay 2 chakra up front and then whatever you wanted for X, up to a maximum of 3, let's not get silly, and discard that many cards from your opponent's hand. The important thing to note about these is the randomness. If it weren't random cards from your opponent's hand, this honestly wouldn't be that great of an effect, but the fact that it's random is really the only thing that was keeping this from being a completely irrelevant set. Hyuga players could actually kind of win games, with these cards. I'm just saying, even a mediocre strategy is a strategy. Hey, I can't be too hard on it. I'm sitting over here throwing shade like I wasn't running a Byakugan deck at the time. Everyone in casual had a Hyuga deck. It was super fun. The last Hyuga card we'll look at is a mission card called the Hyuga Lineage. So if you have a Neji in play, you can search your deck for a Gentle Fist or a Byakugan and put it in your hands, and that's it. This wasn't that bad of a card, actually, because if you played this, then you were paying one card from your hand, and this was going to your chakra. So you had two chakra to play around with. That was either a free Gentle Fist, or it was the start of Byakugan, and you could pay the rest to discard cards from your opponent's hand. I mean, Neji himself isn't good, but baby steps, people, baby steps. While straight up female ninja decks weren't really a thing yet, we were starting to see signs of it here with Kunoichi Battle. We already had a couple of female specific cards in the previous set, so this is the time that if you wanted to get into female only decks, you could viably try it out. Earth style Jutsu isn't part of an archetype, but it's just a really good card. Look through your opponent's battle rewards, take a mission, put it in the discard pile. Obviously, it kind of sucks that it has to go to the discard pile, but how good do you want this card to be for one chakra? I mean, really. One Earth chakra. Look through your opponent's battle rewards. Your opponent loses one battle reward. That on its own is pretty good. This made Earth the first element that could actually see what their opponent was taking from them. Before we move off of Earth, there's one more kind of weird thing that started that I want to talk about. So this Tenten, right? This Tenten can use the Kunai card without paying its costs. Now, for those that don't remember, Kunai is a lightning jutsu that costs 1 chakra and raises your stats to 2. Now, pay attention. Summoning Jutsu Projectile Weapons was a 10-10 only jutsu that let you search your deck for any number of kunai and put them in your chakra area. Rising Twin Dragons allowed you to pay X chakra, which has to be paid with Earth, to put X number of kunai cards from your chakra area into your hands, which could then be played for free by 10-10. This was definitely the dumbest good idea that Bandai had at the time. I'll give you one thing, it's pretty unique, but I'm pretty sure you don't have to be a Naruto expert to figure out the amazingly huge holes in that strategy. 1. If you start out the game with a single kunai in your hand, or you draw one before you start pulling any of this off, then your summoning projectiles loses value. You have to awkwardly find a way to get that kunai into your chakra area, and then you're losing card advantage. 2. Let's say that you're lucky enough that none of your kunai are ever in your hands, and you're able to pull off summoning projectile to put all 3 of them into your chakra area. Why then would you pay 3 chakra to put these into your hands? That doesn't make any sense. Also, for those of you who might be a little slow on the maths, that means you have to have 6 cards in your chakra area to pull this off, 3 of them being the kunai and 3 of them being Earth chakra. And finally, if Tenten's effect is that she can play kunai for free instead of paying the 1 chakra cost, why would you then pay the chakra cost to put them into your hand so that you could play them for free, even though it's the exact same cost as just playing it from your hands? And of course, she's a turn 1 instead of a turn 0. You wouldn't want to break the game by pulling this off on turn 0. Everything about this was poorly planned. This feels like a last-minute addition. Strangely, the one kind of good thing to come out of all of this was summoning Jutsu projectile weapons, because if you think about it, you pay 1 chakra to move 3 cards from your deck to your chakra area. Now, putting aside the fact that they are kunai, this essentially just fills up your chakra really quickly with cards that you don't need, which is kinda cool. If you didn't have to run 10-10 in order to run this card, I actually think this card would have seen some meta play. Now let's talk about Lightning. Lightning, beyond a shadow of a doubt, got the best deal out of Cursive Sand. Two fairly powerful strategies came out of Lightning around this time, and they got some pretty nice big beefy boys we'll talk about in a second. In this set, we were introduced to a new mechanic called Growth. The way it worked is if you have a ninja in play and you have that same ninja in your hand with the effect of Growth, then you could move the ninja in play to your chakra area and play the new one. If a ninja already has a growth coin, you cannot do this. The premier user of this effect was Naruto Uzumaki Fast Growth. And he's so cool, he got 2 growth coins when you put him in play through this. It doesn't sound like much, but it made him a 2-1-5-2 on turn 1, which is that is something. That is legitimately really good. Also, can we just note for a second that this is yet another Naruto card that has negative stats? So not only is the first Naruto so stupid he makes those around him even dumber, but this Naruto is so bad at being a support ninja, he actually makes your head ninjas suck. That's weird. Self-sacrificing attack was a part of some really cheesy strategies. Essentially, if that Naruto's team is defeated, completely defeated, or draws, then the head ninja of your opponent's team takes 1 damage. The thing to note here is Naruto doesn't have to be the head ninja for this effect to go off. You could essentially just put him behind another ninja, attack, and then when that ninja gets injured, you say, okay, now you take 1 damage. And then if you get attacked again, you just block with that ninja's team again, your ninja gets destroyed, and again, their head ninja takes another 1 damage. And you could just keep doing this, and it was especially cancerous if you had a way to heal your ninjas afterwards. Again, kind of a cheesy strategy, but it was a pretty neat card back in the day. But the real star of the show in this set is last minute success. If Naruto is in injured status, he gains the combat attribute Oil. This seems like a simple effect, but it opened the door to a brand new archetype. Toads! Toads are oil combat attributes, so it makes the new Naruto fit right in. At this point, we've only got 2 toads to work with, but boy oh boy is it a good 2 to work with. Gamma can't use Jutsu cards, and he goes back to the bottom of the deck if he's discarded, so he's kind of whatever, but he's a 2-2 and he's a 0-2 when he's injured, so he made a really great support ninja for the deck. But of course, the real daddy boss monster is Gamabunta, who is, your eyes do not mistake you, he is a 9-0-7-0. He can only be put in play with the summoning jutsu, and he could only go out with ninjas who have the oil combat attribute, which is why the Naruto being injured and having oil was important. I always felt like they wasted a bit of an opportunity here by not giving the Naruto before some support combat stats, like maybe make him a 0-2 when he's injured or something. There's still a reason you would run Naruto in the team, but it just seems like such a wasted opportunity. But it's not like it matters anyway. Gamabunta's a 9-0. He can take on most teams by himself with no backup. Now let's take a look at Summoning Jutsu. All it requires is an oil combat attribute, and if you're turn 5, you can summon Gamabunta. If you're turn 2, you can summon Gamma. It's really simple and really effective. It does summon from your deck though, so it's really only effective if you're running 2 or 3 Gamabunta at a time. And of course, you can't have Toads without Jiraiya. Jiraiya also has pretty beefy stats. He's a 7-2, 6-2 when injured. The first one, Pervy's Sage, can come out on turn 5 if your opponent has a female ninja in play. Also, I love that they specify non-Genin ninja. They wanted to make sure they didn't make Jiraiya look like a pedophile in this game. But unfortunately, the joke's on them. Academy students are younger than Genin, and they still trigger his effect and bring him out 1 turn early. Whoops! Honestly, it didn't matter anyway. Releasing the Seal Jiraiya was still better. At the beginning of your turn, you can discard a card from your hand to put a growth coin on a ninja who doesn't have one. This is really useful because most of the growth ninjas are Genin or lower, so this is a great way to growth ninjas that normally wouldn't be growthed. Like, you can use this on Gamabunta to make him a 10-1. Like, what? Of course, this Jiraiya alone made splashing lightning into decks a lot more viable. You could use something like a fire lightning deck and actually use this effect to make Kakashi and the Third Hokage even stronger. 7-4 and a 7-5 for the curious. Strangely enough, we also got our first glimpse of the Fourth Hokage in the game, which was kinda weird because at this point I don't think we even had that many details on him in the show. At the beginning of your turn, you can give this ninja 1 damage to heal all of your other ninja in the village. He is, yeah, he is certainly hero of the village. In case you haven't noticed, this effect is bonkers because he is a ninja that is stronger in injured status who can choose to go into injured status on any turn he wants to and also heals everybody when he does. He's a 6-5 and you can get him to a 6-5 by yourself by just healing all of your other ninjas. He is he is a staple for sure. For sure. With everything I've been saying, you might be wondering how lightning didn't break into the meta with this set. I'll explain. Gamabunta doesn't have any built-in protection, so he can still be 8 trigrams out of existence. He also doesn't have any mental powers, so if he gets into a mental power battle, he's gonna die, which is pretty bad for a ninja who takes so much effort to get out. Summoning Jutsu at the end of the day is just a Jutsu. It can be very easily negated and discarded, and if it is, and you don't pull it off, then your deck kinda sucks because you rely on Gamabunta to be in play. Also, if you happen to draw your Gamabunta, then this card is a lot less useful because Gamabunta has to be in your deck. So if you happen to draw one, then that Gamabunta is dead in your hand no matter what. Jiraiya and the Fourth Hokage are legitimately great boss monsters for Lightning to have. The Fourth Hokage even has 2 mental power, which is very nice and very welcome. Unfortunately for them, they just don't really work in a lightning-based deck, and there's no reason to try and play them in one. It's not necessarily that they suck, it's just that lightning sucks around them. If you're gonna run these, you run them by splashing them into another element, not by playing them in a lightning deck. Yeah, now, if you wanted to run lightning, but not necessarily with frogs, then there was this cute little thing emerging with Rock Lee. The Gift of Perseverance let you put a growth coin on Rock Lee, and this was an interesting effect, because if you already growth Rock Lee into play and he was a 4-1, then you could use Gift of Perseverance to continuously put more growth coins on him because it wasn't affected by the not growthing a ninja into play if it's already growthed rule. Releasing the Gates Lee lets you discard X Chakra to gain X power for the turn, and then he's sorta just died. Definitely not a great Lee, but it's what we had to work with at the time. The 8 Inner Gates is the tool that made Lee sorta viable, in that you could pay 3 to triple your power for the turn and then take 1 damage. The 1 damage cost was surprisingly manageable. You had the Fourth Hokage, you could splash water and play Senbons, or you could just let Lee die and play another one. While we're on the subject of Jutsu, there are a couple of other interesting cards that came out as well. Uzumaki Barrage is pretty simple. You pay X Chakra and you flip X coins and then give that much damage to the target. Essentially what you want to do is pay 2 Chakra if you want to deal 1 damage, or 4 Chakra if you want to deal 2 damage to play the odds. Flipping coins may be kind of a turn-off, but honestly this was a pretty efficient way to kill people, especially if you had plenty of Chakra to burn. Sexy Jutsu was a pretty unique card because it lets you take a ninja from your opponent's team and put it in your own team. Now, if you ran this in a deck with Twin Snake Sacrifice, you might see some pretty interesting fireworks, kiddo. But overall, it was just an interestingly powerful card to come out at the time. Toad Sage was a crucial 3-of in any Toad deck, because if you happen to draw a Gamabunta, this let you put Gamabunta back into your deck so you could summoning jutsu it, and on top of that, you drew 3 cards. Looking back on it now, it is ridiculous how good this card was. even if you weren't going to do the Gamabunta back into your deck thing, just putting a Gamma on the bottom of your deck and drawing 3 cards and getting 2 Chakra out of it is just mwah, so good. Legacy of the Hero made all of your dead ninja go to Chakra instead of the discard pile. Power of the Nine-Tailed Fox Spirit was kind of a dead card, but it did let you do some cool stuff because you could charge cards during the exchange of Jutsu. So, if you played a card like Toad Sage to draw 3 cards and then initiated a battle, your opponent had no idea how many cards you were willing to charge in order to get yourself a new Jutsu. I'd say the only real problem with this was at the time Lightning just didn't have very many good Jutsu. And finally, prelims just stopped your opponent from being able to organize, which was great. So if your opponent happened to drop a card that they were ready to organize into their teams to mount some kind of offensive on you, they were stalled for a turn. Of course, stalling them for a turn is really only effective if you have some kind of plan for getting rid of their cards, but it was a nice start of a strategy, you know? Alright, the only elements we have left are fire and water, so let's talk about them. Fire got access to yet another Kakashi, but this Kakashi's really not that great. It comes out on turn 4 and it doesn't have a hand cost, but outside of that, it's just really not something you would use. The only real advantage to this Kakashi is you don't have to pay a hand cost for it, so you can splash it into any element deck you want to, but I think I would still prefer the vanilla Kakashi over this because they have the same support. For whatever reason, Hayate ended up with 2 cards that are arguably pretty good. Detecting a plan, Hayate could discard himself to get rid of one of your opponent's mission cards, which was probably the best of the two. Personally, though, I got more play out of Judgment. If the head ninja of this ninja's team is discarded, then it goes to the top of the deck. This essentially lets you use on-play effects over and over again because if you played something like Naruto One Last Attack and you got attacked into, and that Naruto was discarded and put onto the top of the deck, then you could just play it again and just keep doing this over and over again until your opponent's whittled down. 3 support definitely doesn't hurt either. Kiba ended up with a pretty unique card as well. It lets you look at your opponent's hand, which, honestly, for a competitive player, is worth the -1 combat. Sure, it probably wasn't going to win very many battles, but the ability to look at your opponent's hand from the very first turn of the game is a pretty good ability. Akamaru was the first attempt at a mill strategy because if it went out to attack with Kiba, your opponent discarded the top card of their deck. At the time, Mill just wasn't good enough to actually utilize this, but it's kind of a cute thing, I guess. If you really want to start milling cards from the top of your opponent's deck to get more information about them, then I could see it, but honestly, just running Kiba's probably enough. Tide of the Deadly Combat was quite the gotcha back in the day. All injured ninjas get healed, and all healthy ninjas get injured. Now, see if you can wrap your head around this one. So you play Tide of the Deadly Combat to injure all ninjas on the field, and then you drop your Fourth Hokage, and at the beginning of your next turn you heal all of your ninjas. Ooh, ooh, the salt. Ooh. Of course, if you really wanted to crank the cheese dial up, you could also play this, let all of your opponent's ninjas get injured, and then during your next turn, you play Disaster of the Nine-Tailed Fox Spirit to deal 1 damage to all of your opponent's ninjas after you heal yours, and wipe your opponent's entire board. Jonin's intervention was a pretty great dare. Essentially, if you gave it to one of your ninjas and then attacked, your opponent had to let the attack through or find a way to injure you without actually killing you. Because if they killed your ninja, you could just drop a Kakashi, and then all of a sudden you won the game. Having your opponent intervention and then dropping the Kakashi that lets you win battle rewards is probably the most cancerous thing that came out for Fire at the time, but most players were smart enough to play around it, so it wasn't necessarily game-breaking. 4-man squads was interesting. You could build a team of 4 ninja, which on the surface sounds really good, but you also have to remember cards like Giant Water Vortex exist, and that just returns even more ninja to your hands. And honestly, getting the extra ninja very rarely ever made that much of a difference unless you and your opponent were tied. Black Border Racer, again, trying out that good old mill strategy. Still wasn't enough to make it a meta thing, but it was there. On to water. Kabuto was the most powerful ninja to come out of water at the time. It was a turn 2, 2-2, 2-2 with mental power of, you guessed it, 2. So not only did it have really decent stats for the time, but it was also the most efficient way to neutralize your opponent's permanent cards. So things like Appearance of Unknown Rivals and Legacy of the Hero really weren't a problem anymore. There is another permanent mission card that this was very effective against, but we'll get to that one later. Yoroi was probably runner-up for best card to come out of water. Very simple effect. You attack, you eat a chakra, and that's it. It doesn't sound like much on the surface, but honestly, taking one of your opponent's chakra every single turn does add up after a while. Murasame was surprisingly effective. After a battle, you could put a -1/-1 coin on one of your opponent's ninja to make them easier to kill. Suen was a card that everybody had way too many copies of. It was a turn 4 5/1, which was pretty decent, and you could discard one chakra to give him 2/2 and then -1/-1 at the end of the turn. So when you started using the effect, he was a 7/3, then a 6/2, then a 5/1, and then you just kind of chump blocked him off and never thought about him again. A grain of courage let one of your chump blockers block an entire battalion of your opponent's attackers. You send one blocker and your opponent cannot win any battle rewards that turn. Oh, you water. And finally, we have Temptation of Power. Temptation of Power let you search your deck for a non-leaf ninja and put it in your hand. Now I know what you might be thinking. Wow, that sounds very oddly non-specific. And you're not wrong. You're not wrong. You could use this in a sand deck. You could use this in an Akatsuki deck. You could use this in a Rogue Ninja deck. You could use this in pretty much every single deck that isn't like a Naruto deck. So kind of a weird thing to put, but it was a very great way to search out your cards. Now, before we wrap up for the day, you cannot talk about strange strategies that came out of Curse of Sand without mentioning Five Prong Seal and Five Prong Seal Release. These were two jutsu that required one of every single element to play, but they usually had a pretty devastating effect to make up for it. People who tried to do this seriously would mainly do it through client cards, because most client cards could be fire and then another element, so you would run mainly a fire deck, but you would do it through client cards so that you could charge the clients for mission cards to gain chakra, but then they can count as another element when you actually pay for them for Five Prong Seal. And make no mistake, Five Prong Seal was the better of the two. Even though it was such a pain to play, the reward was, it's so handsome. One annoying card on your opponent's field of your choice, and every card in your opponent's hand goes back to the deck and they shuffle. So not only are they out their absolute best card, but they don't have a hand to play on anymore, and they're going to top deck for the rest of the game. Inconsistent as it was, this was a pretty savage card back in the day, and there were only better and better and better ways to play it as the game went on. Most people who ran a 5-prong seal deck would run 1 to 2 copies of Seal Release just because it took so long for this strategy to get going that playing a 5-prong Seal Release could end up being worth it if you've already pulled a 5-prong seal off and your opponent was still on the verge of winning. You picked up 5 of your opponent's battle rewards and put them into your hands. And then you, of course, had to discard until you only had 6 cards in your hands. But if you had less than that, then you essentially just got 5 cards for free, and your opponent was out 5 battle rewards, which is halfway to winning the game. So this could essentially reset your opponent's entire battle reward area. Honestly, if you're looking for nutty old strategies, Five-Prong Seal was kind of the way to go, and it could lead to some interesting results if you still continue to play it and look for new ways to break it. So as you could see, a lot of weird fun strategies came out of this set that made casual play a blast, even if it didn't have much of an effect on the actual meta. It was just fun. It was a fun time to be a Naruto card player. And probably the last time the game would be this fun and casual ever again.